Welcome to Shout Out to My Blurts podcast, a division of Custom by Ty, a creative lifestyle brand dedicated to authentic, unapologetic self expression through talent, advocacy, innovation, art, culture, and storytelling. I'm your host, Ty, your HBIC, your head blurred in charge. On this podcast, I discuss all things, most things, some things, black and nerdy, from fandoms to culture, music, art, creativity, experiences, and now, sex. So please be advised that the podcast episodes this season will contain mature themes, explicit language, and honest conversations intended for mature audiences. All right, blurts, let's get on with it.
Baby, you know that I want you.
Hello and welcome. I will be your instructor today. My name is Ty, the HBIC, the head blurt in charge, and I am here with an important lesson. Maybe a lesson that many of you have not been properly taught yourselves. And so I want to break down my teaching and education, or shall I say, miseducation, around sex and pleasure and consent. So, welcome to today's episode titled The Miss Sex Education of Tahirah Harbin. Please pay attention because there's a lot we have to get through. Hey, y'all. So, I want to get on with the lesson and I want to start with the thesis statement of everything I learned about sex was from reruns of Degrassi Junior High and the boys who were more than willing to teach me. So I grew up in the 90s. I came of age in the mid 90s. And, during that time, I went to a Catholic school, which was up the street from my home. Yes, I was a Catholic school girl. Insert whatever joke or stereotype you would like here. Um, and I would come home from school, and of course, you had your after school TV shows that came on. You had your Saved by the Bells, and you had your Disney Afternoon, and you had whatever was playing on Nickelodeon. And listen, I indulged in all of those. However, as I was becoming older, I really liked teen dramas, or as they would say in Canada, dramas. But I say dramas. I liked teen dramas. I liked the 90210s, and I liked the programming that was about teenagers dealing with semi adult things. And one day I'm flipping through the channels and I come across this almost crude, not crude in the content, but crude in the execution. These were not polished teenagers, the ones I was used to seeing on 90210. These were grungy looking kids with accents and pimples and weird hair and weird clothes on a little show called Degrassi Junior High. And I had learned through watching it that Degrassi Junior High, and then later it became Degrassi High, originally aired in the late 80s and early 90s. So that's why the clothing and the hairstyles were a little foreign to me at that time. And out of all the shows that I was consuming, at least the ones I was supposed to be watching, because y'all, I was sneaking to watch 90210, but even then, it wasn't anything like Degrassi. And from what I understand, 90210 was inspired by Degrassi Junior High. And what I saw in Degrassi Junior High were teenagers talking about masturbating, talking about condoms, talking about sex, dealing with teen pregnancy, dealing with sexual harassment, and you actually saw the condom. I remember there was an episode of A Different World where Ron was talking about a condom and he said it was in his back pocket, but I guess he couldn't show it. In Degrassi, they showed the prophylactics. And so it was very intriguing to me. And I became even more intrigued because I was a young lady coming into my body, growing boobs, discovering myself, and this magical, wonderful button whose only purpose on my body is to receive pleasure. But a lot of the stuff that I learned and had to do was in secret because I was socialized to feel ashamed of that body part and those feelings. And so a lot of the stuff I did in secret. I would, of course, wait till my parents were in their rooms downstairs and I would sneak out into the living room so I can try to decipher what was happening on the Spice Channel. Try to squint through the squiggly lines to catch whatever was happening behind the audio. And of course, you had Red Shoe Diaries on Showtime, which I liked because it provided a storyline before the um, sex, which of course was not real sex. It was simulated sex in those programs, but then you had HBO Real Sex. Real sex take four! And those covered an array of topics. I mean, from toys to mannequins to sex positive poly retreats to erotic poetry. And it blew my mind. And I especially loved when they had Black guests to express their experiences because the way Black people express sex and sexuality is just different. You know, we lit. And so that was something that was exciting to me as I was young and as I was discovering myself. Um, and even though I had questions, I kind of kept them to myself. We didn't really have Google or things like that back then. So who were you supposed to ask? Well, you would think you're supposed to ask your parents about these things. But in my household, my parents were not the parents that you really go to with those questions. And so, who did I ended up going to? My peers, my 12, 13, 14-year-old friends who knew just as much as I did, but like to pretend they knew a little bit more because we all were kind of watching those channels and would glean whatever information we thought was enough to get us by. And so even though, yes, I went to a Catholic school, um, we were a bunch of horny kids that talked about sex and who were all dating each other. And it was odd because there was a time where we were given not just deodorant and like menstrual pads, but condoms and lubrication. I don't know which of our teachers or administrators were asleep at the wheel for giving a bunch of Catholic school kids condoms, but it was actually kind of cool. And so, media is where I got a lot of my sexual education. And from that media, I thought it was telling me everything that I needed to know at the time as I was getting older and as I was discovering things, as I was watching programming on television. Every boyfriend Moesha ever had, I wanted her to have sex with them. So I wanted her to have sex with every single boyfriend that she had on the show because they were all so cute. I remember there was an episode of the Sinbad show because Ray J was my first crush. Y'all, I know. But I liked him on the Sinbad show. And there was an episode where he had a girl in his room and Sinbad's character had to have a conversation with him. And there would be times I would think to myself, well, where was my conversation? And I did have a conversation, but it wasn't from either of my parents. Now, prior to a lot of my self discovery and experience that happened in the seventh grade, I was in the fifth grade, 10 going on 11 years old, and had a teacher by the name of Sister Timothy Howard, the best damn educator to ever do it. Sister Timothy was tough, she played no games, and she deeply, deeply cared about her students. And I don't know what gave her the wherewithal that fateful day to have that conversation with a bunch of prepubescent girls. But she took the opportunity. I remember it like it was yesterday in some respects. The boys, I think, were in their gym class because we had separate gym classes, and the girls stayed back and had health class because that's the way it went. If the girls had gym class, the boys stayed back and they had health class, and vice versa. And this day, Sister Timothy went into a no holds barred, full lecture slash conversation about sex, and not just the basics, not just reproductive organs, but sex. Like, this nun literally wrote the word fuck on the chalkboard. I was aghast, okay? And because I was somebody who grew up with a lot of shame about my body and how I felt in and about my body, I was too embarrassed to engage in the conversation. I couldn't believe it was happening. I quite literally had my head down on the table, but I could hear her talking. I could hear her talking about hygiene and how important it is for us to keep our hygiene together, our underarms washed because some of us started smelling and some of us weren't there yet, but some of us, our bodies were changing. Hair growing where hair wasn't there before. It's like that episode of The Simpsons when they were watching that tape and the bunny got fur where they didn't have fur before. Yeah, that was the conversation Sister Timothy was having with us. And she also had a conversation with us about sex, about boys, and about expectations. And I remember some of my classmates like giggling because it's like, what? This is strange. This is uncomfortable. And a lot of people's response to discomfort is to laugh. Um, but she talked about all of it. She answered well, not mine, but she answered the questions that were being asked of her. And even though my face was flushed with embarrassment, I never forgot that conversation. I never forgot that she took the time to really talk to us as young people that were coming of age and who were going to be managing our bodies and our sexuality as we continue to get older. She wasn't no fool. She knew what was coming down the pipeline. This woman had been an educator since 1950. So, yeah, I always appreciate her for that. But the conversations were not happening at home. Um, and it hindered me in a lot of ways. All right, so listen, my dad, rest in peace to him. Happy Father's Day, Daddy. But my dad was not somebody who talked to us about sex. He didn't do it. I don't recall him. I mean, I don't know. He could have had a conversation with my brother that I never knew about, but when it came to his girls, he didn't talk to us. And he didn't even really talk to us about boys and how boys are. The most my father really did to have any kind of semblance of a sex talk with me was to give me this book that I still have, Sexual Etiquette 101 and More. I remember the day he came in my room, sat this on my desk, and walked away. But I got a lot of information from this book. Um, you know, wrote my name on it, Ty Harbin. This was originally published 1995. It was published. So yeah, this is around the time he gave it to me. I was like 12 or 13 years old. Um, and on the cover, it's a young man, and you see his desk. He has a Fozzie Bear from the McDonald's Happy Meals around Christmas time, but he also has some tapes, some books, a Tori Amos CD, and a couple of condoms sitting on the desk. And it's very interesting. I always like this cover because it's very telling. You got the Fozzie Bear stuffy, and you got the tapes and the calculator and the books and the CD, and now you've added condoms. This is a person who has been growing up, and now he needs to understand sex. And so this book covers an array of topics. And what I like about it is it isn't just, like I said, it's not just reproduction. A lot of people, when they do talk about sex, they just want to make it about reproduction, especially if you are Christian. And I grew up Christian. I am no longer Christian, but a lot of the teaching is around abstinence. And you're not really teaching young people about what could happen or their emotional state or their body or pleasure or nothing. You're just teaching them, nope, no sex till marriage. That's it. And it's like, okay, let's say they don't have sex until marriage and then they get to marriage and then they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And so, what I like about this book is it covers an array of topics. Chapter one, the human aspect of sexuality, and it talks about your personal life plan, your decision making, you know, communication comes before sex. If you're ready, if you have regrets, it talks about your self esteem and how you feel about yourself, because how you feel about yourself can um, trickle down into how you feel about yourself sexually. You have a lot of people who don't feel the best about themselves, and so having sex is a way for them to feel desired or wanted or good about themselves, but then they end up still feeling bad. So, and it gives stories, it talks about hooking up, it talks about exes, it talks about sexual assault and harassment, talks about the menstrual cycle and PMS. It talks about masturbation and sexual concerns of men, sexually transmitted diseases. Like this, I devoured this book. So, yes, my dad gave me the information, but I know I could have benefited from further conversation with him about this material because I kind of just had this and had to teach myself. That's essentially what it was. It's just me teaching myself. Contraception, it talks about. It talks about your options if you are facing an unwanted pregnancy. So it doesn't shy away from anything. You know, I mentioned Degrassi earlier, and they did have two instances where they showed characters who had, no, three, because I forgot about the Schools Out movie, but there are three instances of characters who get pregnant in the show, and you see the different decisions that they make. One decided to keep her baby, The other decided to have an abortion. And then another one also decided to have an abortion. And so you saw that. And even when they picked up the reboot series or Degrassi The Next Generation, you saw that in some of the characters on that show. A character who got pregnant and had an abortion, a character who got pregnant and gave her baby up for adoption, another character who got pregnant, had the baby, tried to keep the baby, and then decided that the baby would have been best with another family. Um, so it talked about those things. It talked about sexual assault. And that's something that I don't feel like a lot of people prepare, not just the girls, but these boys. There needs to be conversation with these boys about keeping their hands to themselves, about consent. And so, yes, my dad gave me a book, and I'm grateful to him for that because I still have it. And, maybe down the line, I could help someone else out with that book. Maybe my own children can benefit from learning things out of that book. Um, but a conversation would have gone a long way, not only for us to bond, but for him to understand where I was in my journey and whatever questions I had about understanding boys and sex and dating. And it's interesting. My dad was a youth counselor at one time, and I'm certain he had these conversations, at least with the young males. And I could see why it wouldn't be appropriate for him to have these conversations with young women and girls who were not his children, but I was his child, and that conversation would have gone a long way. But I'm grateful for the book. Now, my mother is another story, and I'm going to try really hard not to vilify her in this conversation, because one thing I have learned to understand and realize about my mother is she could only give me the tools that she had. And it seems like there was a lot that she wasn't taught. There was a lot she learned the hard way. And there was a lot that she internalized and unfortunately passed on to her daughters, because sex and sexuality was something that I was socialized by her to feel some shame towards. There was not so much of a sex talk. Like, she of course would like mention things about like our periods. So okay, that was one thing. And even when I got my period, like, I kept it very secret. I didn't She didn't know until like 2 years after I started my period that I was even getting a period, because I was ashamed. um I started masturbating in the 4th grade. Of course, that was something I kept very hush hush to myself. Didn't talk about it, didn't express my feelings or what I was thinking of during those times. That was just me self-discovering. And with my mother, I think there was a lot of fear there. Specifically, I think when it came to me, I have an older sister who became pregnant at 16 and had her children when she was 17. They're twins. And I think that really affected my mother, but I wish she would have. I mean, I don't know what conversation she may or may not have had with my sister prior to her getting pregnant. I don't really know. I just know that it kind of negatively impacted everybody. And it's unfortunate, because I know my sister could have used the love and support and understanding and grace from my mother. And so when I was coming of age and I was growing up and I was curious about boys and interested um in getting to know boys, you know, I remember coming home one day, it might have been 3rd or 4th grade, and just trying to talk to my mom, girl talk, and hey, there's a boy in my class that I like. He's kind of funny and da, 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 da. And instantly I'm shut down. Like when I say shut down, I mean shut all the way down. Like my mother would do this thing where if you wanted to talk to her about something, if she was uncomfortable with the conversation, she quite literally gave you the hand and would say, I'm not talking about this. And so when I came home excited and telling her about this boy in my class, well, you don't go to school for boys, you go to school to learn. And that was that on that. And I think that's where I learned to kind of keep things quiet. That's where I learned to kind of have a little bit of shame behind a normal feeling that you would express around that age. Um, and so I couldn't talk to her about anything. I couldn't ask her questions about my body parts or why I had certain feelings or any understanding about arousal or pleasure or curiosity. I couldn't go there with her. And so of course I had to learn these things on my own by watching television and then eventually having conversations with my same age peers. These are not the people your children need to be learning from. I'm sorry. As a parent, your child needs to be able to come to you first. And I just want to say this because I'm grateful for Sister Timothy for having that conversation with a bunch of knucklehead girls. Even these days, they don't really allow teachers to really talk to the kids in such a way. I mean, unless they get the parents' permission, and a lot of times the parents don't want to give permission. A lot of times the parents are just going off of what they know. And especially if you have a parent of a religious background, they're not even going to entertain the conversation of pleasure and arousal. They're going to shut it down because, well, sex isn't supposed to happen until you're married. Well, not everybody wants to be married. Not everybody is heterosexual. And so the conversations need to be open. And so I would if I may advise any parents that are listening to really check yourself when it comes to how you learned about sex and sexuality. Um Ask yourself if you have developed better ways of communicating and understanding the beauty in sexuality and having the ability to really share the information with your children in a way that they need to know. They're going to have questions, and these questions are going to be outside of the box of what you're thinking that they're going to ask. They're being exposed to more, and so they need to know more. And as a parent, you need to be equipped and you need to be open to allowing maybe somebody who, of course, a person that you trust who is in your child's life. Not some weirdo, but a teacher, a mentor, a coach, a aunt, an uncle, like that you trust with your child to talk about these things because they're going to have these questions. And listen, I don't want to get it twisted. I am not advocating for underage sex. Kids, especially in the elementary, middle school age, are definitely way too young. So that is not what I'm getting at. But they need to be prepared if and when they're ready, even if they're not ready until they are well into their adulthood. But the foundation needs to be there. And unfortunately for me, it wasn't there. So, yeah, I also mentioned in my theses that not only did I learn from reruns of Degrassi Junior High, but I learned firsthand about sex. And that is not the way I should have learned. So when I was 13 in the seventh grade, I don't know. There was a shift. I was always a goody two shoes, right? That's why my YouTube channel is called Chaotic Goody Good. Like I've always been that good girl, well mannered, dutiful, good grades, rule following. I've always been that girl. And when I got to seventh grade, there was an influx of new students, and they were different, and they were cool, and they knew the latest dances and songs. And I wanted to be like them, and I wanted to be accepted by them, and I wanted to be in the in crowd. And so I would do the things that I thought I needed to do for them to think I was cool like them. I, uh, sorry, mom, if she ever listens to any episodes of my podcast, but I had a bunch of friends over after school that came to the house and were hanging out, and I had to eventually kick them out because they started smoking weed in the house and breaking picture frames. I know, stupid. Um, One day I went for a walk with a couple of my so called friends after school. And one of the friends knew somebody who was going to procure us some weed so that we could hang out and smoke together. We're 13, by the way, like literally 13-year olds. We're all hanging out, we're smoking, and around the corner comes three guys, and one of the friends I was with knew the guys. And I guess the one guy thought I was cute and wanted my information. And we would talk on the phone, and he was asking me things about, are you a virgin? And at the time, I was like, I think I know what he means by that. I think I know what virgin means. Like, I got my book. So my book tells me this is what it means. And I haven't done that. I had done stuff at that point. I had had my first kiss with a boy who was in the eighth grade, and I was in the seventh. And my first kiss was a tongue kiss, and it threw me off. And I had been felt up. I had had those things go on, but I had never had sex, intercourse. And I remember talking to my so called girlfriends about it, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to really proceed. And they're like, oh, yeah, girl, it's no big deal. Oh, yeah, and he's really cute and he likes you. Go ahead. Da, da, da. And you would think that these girls were out here and had all kinds of experience the way that they was hyping me up. And so, you know what I did? I lost my virginity. And the next day at school, I go to my girlfriends. I'm like, guess what? Guess what? Guess what? Me and such, we did it. We did it. He came over to the house and we did it. These same girls that I thought were so cool, these same girls who I just wanted them to like and accept me, these same girls who peer pressured me and hyped me up into losing my virginity, were now the ones calling me a hoe, were now the ones spreading rumors about me. And so, with rumors comes a reputation, and with a reputation comes expectations. And so I had to deal with that. I had to deal with my once squeaky clean image, this well mannered goody two shoes, good grades, Pris, now being the class slut. I had boys who had spoke to me prior, now expressing an interest in getting to know me. Boys having expectations of me, and not just in my class, but in my neighborhood that I grew up in. And because sex was something I grew to be ashamed of and did in secret, because I now had this reputation and I still wanted to be considered cool, because these expectations were being put on me, I felt the need to give everybody what they were expecting of me. And these are the ramifications that young people deal with when they don't have proper sex education. Sex education is not just about reproduction, like I've mentioned time and time again. Yes, we need to talk about our young people about the um, possibility of unwanted pregnancies, but we also need to talk to them about their self worth, their self esteem, their bodily autonomy, coercion, consent, pleasure, arousal, safety, peer pressure. We need to make them feel safe to have someone to talk to so that they don't feel the weight of having to be what everybody else is expecting them to be instead of who they're meant to be. And so it took me some years to recover. And, I'll get more into that later. It was a lot I had to go through, but we have all season to kind of delve into that. But I want to end this episode with speaking about this latest episode that I watched of The Chi. The Chi is in its final season. We have been watching these characters for the past 8 years, and one of the characters is a character by the name of Emmett. So, we've been following Emmett since he was a teenager out here doing whatever, getting a bunch of girls pregnant, acting like a little ass boy throughout this entire series. And even though his mom, Jada, rest in peace to Jada, even though Jada tried her best, it wasn't enough to kind of get Emmett in line. And then his dad eventually got back into his life, and things started going better for him, and he is in a more stable place. Well, now Emmett has to be a more hands-on father. One of his children, who is 12 years old, came to live with Emmett. And in this past episode, Emmett needed to have a conversation with his 12-year-old son about sex after catching his son watching porn on his phone. Because, like I mentioned, it's more accessible to these children, y'all. You have to monitor these phones, these devices, these tablets. It's easier for them to access. You don't even need a subscription anywhere. You can get on Twitter and you got porn right on Twitter. It's not like it was where we had to descramble the TV or stay up late and sneak and watch Real Sex or Red Shoe Diaries. They have it at their literal fingertips. And so Emmett came face to face with the fact that he had to have a conversation with his son. But not only that, he had to come to terms with himself and what he learned about sex and all the misinformation and miseducation that he had. And the scene played out so unexpectedly beautiful. Like, literally, I was crying watching that scene. Nut on a girl's face. What? Even during sex. Sounds awkward. Come on, consent. Come on, consent. You go rub it out in the bathroom. It's okay for you to masturbate. Yes. Our Emmett is growing up. I didn't know about sex. Yeah. How you feeling? Wow. Enlightened. And he used it correctly. No notes. That scene was perfect. Emmett didn't scold his son when his son had real questions. Like, literally, this little boy asked about coming on a girl's face. My God, I was shocked when he said that. And Emmett calmly handled that. He talked about consent. He talked about protection. He talked about he intentionally used the word partner because he's like, I don't want to assume, to his son, I don't want to assume you like girls. Your partner could be another male. And so I don't want to assume, but even if it is, you still have to be safe. He opened the door for them to continue having the conversation because his son is going to continue to have questions. He talked about self pleasure and how self pleasure could add to the experience of pleasure you experience with a partner. And like I said, no one is condoning young people to be having sex at a young age. I do believe that this is something they should wait for, that they're informed, that they're safe, that they have a understanding. It's not just something to do. It's not just something they're pressured into. It's not anything that they are putting expectations on themselves or each other about, but it is informed, it is enthusiastically consented, and it is when they are much older and ready. But the conversations need to start now. And that scene played out so beautifully. And at the end, Emmett asked his son, how do you feel? And this young man, and I know this is a TV show, but listen, this could be real life. This could be an example of the conversations we have with our young people. His son answered him and said that he felt enlightened. Enlightened, y'all. We have a duty to allow our young people to experience the enlightenment that comes with education and information that lead to further conversation. And so I thank y'all so much for tuning in to this episode, the Miss Sex Education of Tahirah Harbin. I am less Miss Sex Educated. I am grateful for my experiences. Like I said, I'll talk about them more. Of course, I would not advise or want my path for anybody. And it's a miracle I came out on the other side and fairly unscathed. But imagine if I had had more information and I was able to really understand myself and not feel shame around sex and sexuality. I don't feel any shame now. I got no shame, none. And so that's why we're going to continue the season of this podcast. I'm so grateful for y'all for coming back. You know, we are going to be talking about sex all season long, all different aspects of sex and sexuality, pleasure, eroticism, all of that. All of that. I can't wait. I'm going to have some amazing guests on the podcast. I'm going to be sharing some more of my personal stories and the things I've gone through and what I've learned. I'm going to be putting y'all on to some very dope people and some dope information. I'm really grateful to have this platform in order to speak in this way about these things. I'm grateful for the other people who do use their podcast platform to speak about sex on a regular basis. And I don't know, maybe shout out to my blurs, may talk about sex more in the future. But for this season, that's what we on. I thank you. Please rate and review my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And, you know, like I said, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be able to provide whatever little bit of information to you all. And thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace. Thank you for listening to Shout Out to My Blurts podcast, a division of Custom by Ty. Be sure to stream, subscribe, and leave a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. Watch full video episodes on my YouTube channel, Chaotic Goodie, Goodie, Good. For bonus content, behind-the-scenes conversations, and extended episodes, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/totallytie. Follow the Instagram at SOTMB_pod. And to learn more about Custom by Ty, please visit customsbyty.wixsite.com/customsbyty.